Imagine waking up one day and realizing that your smile has become your prison. You greet the world with warmth. You say it's fine when it's not. You nod in agreement, even when your stomach knots in quiet protest. You ask others how they're doing, but no one thinks to ask you. You apologize when you've done nothing wrong. You compliment people you secretly resent. You offer help, time, energy, and they take and take and take, but they call you so sweet, such a good person, always so nice. And you believe them, because being nice feels good, safe, accepted, but beneath the surface of your pleasantness, something darker simmers. You feel drained after social interactions. You replay conversations in your head, wondering if you offended someone. You feel guilty when you say no. You feel invisible when you say yes. You've built a personality around the comfort of others, and now you're a stranger to your own discomfort. Here lies the paradox. You want to be loved, but you keep hiding the parts of you that are unlovable. You want to feel free, but you've handcuffed yourself to being the good one. You want connection, but you're terrified of what will happen if you stop smiling. So you stay nice, pleasant, predictable, but deep down, you wonder, what is the cost of this niceness? What does it take from you each time you silence your truth for someone else's comfort? What do you lose every time you smile when you want to scream? And more importantly, why does it feel easier to betray yourself than to risk disappointing someone else? You weren't born this way. You didn't enter the world apologizing for your existence. You learned it. Somewhere between rejection and reward, shame and survival. You decided it was safer to be liked than to be real. But what if being nice isn't always kind? What if being agreeable isn't always compassionate? What if your goodness is quietly killing you? Because being nice all the time sounds noble, but it's often just fear in disguise. Fear of conflict, fear of rejection, fear of being perceived as difficult, selfish, emotional, too intense. And fear has a voice. It tells you, don't say that they won't like you. Don't ask for too much, you'll seem needy. Don't show how you really feel, they'll think you're crazy. So you smile, you shrink, you serve, and you disappear. Not all at once, but slowly, piece by piece, in the name of keeping the peace. So here's the great contradiction. The more you perform niceness, the less connected you actually feel. The more you suppress your needs, the more resentful you become. The more agreeable you are, the more people mistake you for someone without depth. And yet, you keep doing it, because the world rewards nice, until it DOESN, single quotes, T dot, until you break down, until you feel hollow, until the smile feels like a lie you can't keep telling. So ask yourself, what if your kindness isn't kindness at all, but a survival strategy? What if your niceness is the armor you built to survive a world that punished your authenticity? What if the love you've received for being so easygoing, so selfless, so good, was never for you, but for your performance? And what happens when the mask begins to crack? What happens when you finally say, no, I'm not okay. No, I don't agree. No, I don't want to do that. Will they still love you? Will you still love yourself? Because the cost of being nice all the time may be the parts of you that are truest, wildest, most alive. And if being liked comes at the price of your authenticity, what are you really winning? What if being nice isn't the virtue you think it is, but the reason you no longer recognize yourself? This isn't a call to become cruel. It's a question, one that echoes in the quiet moments you avoid. Who are you without the smile? And are you ready to meet that person? There's a moment in life, not loud, not cinematic, when something inside you quietly breaks, and no one sees it, because from the outside, you're doing everything right. You're polite, you're responsible, you keep the peace, but inside, you're disappearing. You try to trace it back. Was it the moment you didn't speak up in that meeting again? Was it when you said yes to something you absolutely didn't want to do again? Was it the night you cried yourself to sleep because no one noticed how much you give and how little you receive? Or was it before all of that years ago, when you first learned that your truth was too dangerous to be spoken? This isn't about social etiquette. It's about identity. Because being nice all the time isn't just a personality trait. It's a mask, a role, a survival mechanism forged in the fires of early emotional conditioning. To understand this, you have to go back to when love was not a given, but a reward. Back to when you first learned that certain emotions made the people around you uncomfortable and that your survival depended on their approval. This is where the false self is born. Psychologist Donald Winnicott called it the false self, the version of you that emerges not from authenticity, but from adaptation, a self that doesn't grow but reacts, a self that isn't chosen but performed. It starts in childhood, when you cried and were told, stop being dramatic, when you got angry and were punished, when you asked for attention and were made to feel selfish. In those moments, you learned that being good meant being quiet, that love was conditional, that your worth was measured by how little trouble you caused. So you made yourself smaller. You silenced your feelings. You became nice, not because you were kind, but because kindness was safe. But safety built on self-erasure isn't safety at all. It's a prison, one that looks like approval on the outside, but feels like suffocation within. Carl Jung spoke of the persona, the mask we wear to present ourselves acceptably to the world. It's necessary to a point. But when the persona becomes your identity, you lose touch with the self beneath it. You begin to live for the gaze of others, and slowly your inner world collapses under the weight of all that repression, because here's the hidden psychological root. You've equated being liked with being safe. You've internalized the idea that conflict equals danger, that anger is destructive, that saying no makes you unworthy. So now, as an adult, you still live under the shadow of those early lessons. You avoid confrontation like it's a battlefield. You feel guilt after expressing even mild frustration. You soften every truth until it's no longer recognizable. But all of this comes at a cost. Self-respect, because every time you silence your truth, you tell yourself it doesn't matter. Every time you swallow your pain, you reinforce the belief that your feelings are too much. Every time you perform kindness while suppressing resentment, you deepen the fracture between who you are and who you pretend to be. Nietzsche once said, the individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe. And you, in your struggle to belong, have let the tribe swallow you. But belonging that costs your truth isn't belonging. It's compliance. And here's the great irony. Being nice all the time doesn't even lead to genuine connection. It leads to shallow relationships, to being liked but not loved, needed but not known. Because how can anyone love the real you if you never let them meet you? This is the spiritual cost, the existential wound. You wake up one day and realize you've been so busy trying to be acceptable to others that you've made yourself unacceptable to your soul, and you keep doing it because being honest feels dangerous, because being disliked feels like death. But what you're afraid of is not rejection, it's abandonment. You've wired your nervous system to equate emotional honesty with loss. So every time you consider saying what you really think, your body reacts as if you're stepping off a cliff. This isn't weakness, it's survival wiring. And until you confront it, until you trace that thread all the way back to the original moments, you were made to feel unsafe in your own truth. You will keep betraying yourself in the name of being nice, because what no one tells you is this: the constant performance of goodness becomes a form of self-abuse, one that looks admirable but feels like decay. You smile so others don't worry. You agree so others don't argue. You bend so others don't break. But what about you? Sartre argued that bad faith is when we lie to ourselves in order to avoid the burden of freedom. And in many ways, that's what niceness becomes: a lie. A way to avoid the terrifying responsibility of being real, because realness risks rejection. Realness requires boundaries. Realness might make people uncomfortable, but realness is also where freedom lives, where depth lives, where you live. So here you are at the edge of a question you can't ignore anymore. What if being nice all the time isn't the virtue you thought it was, but the very reason you feel unseen, unheard, and unalive? You were not born to be palatable. You were born to be whole, and the longer you perform, the longer you postpone that wholeness. So now the tension builds, because the next step is terrifying. Who are you when you stop being nice? Oh, you think you're doing the right thing. You bite your tongue. You smile through discomfort. You apologize when you've done nothing wrong. You say yes even when your entire body wants to scream no, because that's what good people do, right? But what if good has become a costume, and you're slowly suffocating beneath it? What if this constant performance of niceness isn't just emotionally draining, but so? Let's strip the mask off and look at what's really happening. The first consequence is quiet, invisible, and deadly. Resentment, it doesn't show up overnight. It builds like rust in your spirit, a slow erosion of joy and authenticity. Every unspoken boundary, every fake smile, every "I'm fine when you're not" adds to it, and one day you realize you're angry all the time, but not at others, at yourself, because you keep allowing things that violate your inner world. And the worst part, you can't even blame anyone else. You trained people to treat you this way. You made it easy, convenient, comfortable. You handed over your self-respect in exchange for temporary peace. And now, you're a stranger in your own life. But resentment isn't just emotional, it's biological. Your nervous system keeps the score. Chronic people-pleasing activates your stress response. Cortisol surges, your immune system weakens, and your body lives in a constant state of low-grade threat. Why? Because you're never really safe. Not when you're always scanning for others' approval. Not when your worth depends on how well you manage everyone else's emotions. Not when your identity is built on avoiding conflict instead of facing truth. Over time, this leads to emotional burnout. Not the kind you fix with a weekend off. The kind that leaves you numb. You start losing the ability to feel anything deeply. Not just anger, but also joy, excitement, inspiration. Your inner life becomes a grayscale photograph. Technically functional, but lifeless. The second consequence is relational decay. Being nice all the time doesn't foster deep connection, it prevents it. People trust authenticity, not accommodation. And when you're constantly filtering yourself to be liked, people never get to know you. They know a curated version, a soft echo of their preferences and needs. So what happens? You attract relationships that are built on convenience, not respect. People who rely on you but never see you. People who expect you to overextend but wouldn't cross the street for your pain. And it's not their fault. They're responding to the version of you you've presented. Because here's the brutal truth. You taught them that your needs are negotiable, so they believe you. You become the emotional sponge, absorbing everyone else's mess, but never cleaning up your own. The fixer, the helper, the one who's so strong, so chill, so low maintenance. But what you are is invisible. The third consequence is identity distortion. When you're nice all the time, you start to forget who you really are. Your desires blur, your opinions dissolve, your preferences vanish. You become a mirror, reflecting everyone else, but never reflecting yourself. And at some point, you wake up and realize you have no idea what you want, what you believe, what you feel, because you've outsourced your entire identity to the comfort of others. You've mistaken likability for love, and now you don't know the difference. Cognitive psychologist Dr. Jennifer Freyd coined the term betrayal blindness. It refers to the act of ignoring or suppressing betrayal in order to maintain a connection. When you betray yourself to be nice, you create an internal form of this blindness. You know something's wrong. You feel it in your body, but you look away, because to face it would mean risking rejection, and rejection to the nice person feels like annihilation. So you stay, in friendships that drain you, in jobs that exploit you, in roles that bury you, and all the while your soul whispers, this isn't who you are. But you silence that voice, because what if being true means being alone? That's the fourth consequence. Spiritual fragmentation. You begin to live two lives. The outer one, polished, agreeable, socially adored, and the inner one, wounded, voiceless, full of quiet rage. This is where anxiety and depression often take root, not as pathologies, but as protests, symptoms of a deeper misalignment. Your body rebels when your soul is silenced. Your emotions scream when your boundaries are ignored. But in a culture that glorifies self-sacrifice, especially for women, empaths, and caretakers, you're told that this is noble, that this slow erosion of self is somehow love. It isn't. It's martyrdom dressed as virtue. There's a fifth consequence, and it might be the most tragic of all. Lost time. You waste years, even decades, performing. Instead of living, you miss the relationships that could have seen you, the opportunities that required boldness, the dreams that demanded boundaries. You become a character in someone else's story, an extra in your own life, all because you thought being nice would make you safe. But what it really made you was invisible to yourself, and now you face a terrifying reality. People like you, but they don't know you, because you haven't let them. Not out of malice, but out of fear. You feared rejection more than you feared self-abandonment. So you chose silence. You chose pleasantness. You chose to shrink. But silence doesn't protect you. It just delays the reckoning. And the longer you postpone that reckoning, the more of your life you trade for comfort. Until one day you realize you've been bleeding out quietly, while everyone else called you strong. This is the hidden cost of being nice all the time. Not drama, not explosion, but erosion, not heartbreak, but soul-ache. And it begs the question, how much more of yourself are you willing to lose, just to be liked? Because if everyone loves you, but you don't love you, is that really love? You're not broken. You were just conditioned, trained like a dog to sit, smile, stay small. From childhood, you learned that being nice was safer than being honest. That compliance earned you affection. That pleasing others made you lovable, but now you're older, and the truth is no longer silent. It's restless. There comes a moment in every self-abandoning life when the soul refuses to play dead. Maybe it's a quiet Sunday afternoon when someone asks you what you want, and you realize you don't know. Maybe it's the 100th apology for something you didn't do. Maybe it's the way your chest tightens every time you smile through pain. Whatever the spark, it burns, and that fire is your rebellion. So, how do you begin again? How do you unlearn a lifetime of performance and become real? You start by recognizing a paradox. Being loved by everyone is the surest way to be known by no one, because the more universal your likability, the more diluted your truth. You can't be fully liked and fully yourself at the same time. One requires performance, the other requires risk. The rebellion begins with one terrifying word. No, no, I don't want to go. No, that doesn't work for me. No, I'm not okay with that. No, I matter. Each no is a reclamation, not of power over others, but of power over yourself. You stop being a hostage to politeness. You stop being emotionally available to those who are emotionally absent. You stop keeping peace that costs you your self-respect. Because here's the secret nobody tells you. Kindness isn't about being nice. It's about being true, and sometimes truth isn't convenient. Sometimes love sounds like I won't keep doing this. Sometimes compassion means letting people feel disappointed and letting yourself feel free. You don't need to be harsh. You don't need to be cruel, but you do need to be clear. Niceness hides, clarity reveals, and clarity is what sets you free. But that freedom comes with grief. Grief for the years you lost. Grief for the self you betrayed. Grief for the relationships that were built on your silence, not your soul. You will lose people, not because you were too much, but because you stopped being less, and the world doesn't always reward that. It's easier to accept a version of you that doesn't challenge the system. Easier to admire your politeness than to face your power. But you weren't born to be digestible. You were born to be whole. Wholeness is messy. It's contradictory. It's full of inconvenient truths, but it's real. And only in the real can you be truly loved. Only when you stop managing others' emotions do you find the ones who can hold yours. Only when you stop pleasing everyone do you meet those who cherish your boundaries. Only when you stop apologizing for existing do you start to exist. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Not who you were taught to be, not who makes others comfortable, but who your soul has always whispered you are." This isn't a one-time rebellion. It's a daily choice to speak when silence would be easier, to say no when yes would keep the peace, to sit in the discomfort of disapproval and still honor your truth. You'll stumble, you'll backslide, you'll feel guilt. That's part of the detox. When you've been trained to self-abandon, self-respect feels like arrogance. When you've been praised for being easy, being honest feels like betrayal. When you've built your identity on being liked, being authentic feels like death. But it's not death. It's rebirth. The old self, the agreeable, pleasant, invisible one, is dying. And something braver is being born. You don't need to become hard. You don't need to lose your gentleness, your empathy, your care. But now, they belong to you, not to everyone who demands them. Your kindness becomes a gift, not a currency. Your love becomes an offering, not a survival tactic. And that is power. Not the power to dominate, but the power to choose yourself, not as a last resort, but as a first instinct. To choose discomfort over dishonesty, to choose depth over approval. The rebellion is not loud, it is not dramatic, it is not cinematic, it is quiet, it is found in the pause before you say yes, in the breath you take before apologizing, in the moment you choose truth over peace, and every time you choose yourself, every time you honor your no, hold your boundary, speak your need, you rewrite the story, you reclaim your name from the grip of niceness, and you begin, at last, to live. You always thought being nice was the right thing to do, that selflessness was sacred, that making others happy was how you earned love, that putting yourself last was a form of virtue. But what if that was never the truth? What if the entire premise, the entire system of worth you built your identity on, was a lie? Not because kindness is wrong, but because the version of nice you were sold was corrupted. You weren't taught kindness. You were taught compliance. You weren't taught empathy. You were taught self-erasure dressed as virtue. You were taught to suppress your instincts, invalidate your needs, and call it love. But love that costs you yourself isn't love, it's martyrdom. And martyrdom makes great stories, but it makes miserable lives. Here is the ultimate truth. You don't have to sacrifice your self-respect to be a good person. That idea that being nice means being endlessly available, agreeable, accommodating, is not moral. It's manipulation. Not by you, but of you. It's a system that profits from your silence, that benefits from your guilt, that thrives when you shrink, because the truth is threatening. Your boundaries are threatening. Your clarity is threatening. Your no is threatening, not because it's harmful, but because it disrupts the illusion that your value depends on being liked, the illusion that harmony is always holy, the illusion that you are only lovable when you disappear. But you weren't born to disappear. You were born to take up space, to own your voice, to be fully alive, not half nice and half dead. And the world needs that version of you, not the one who tiptoes around everyone's comfort, not the one who performs goodness to avoid guilt, but the one who knows this, that true kindness is rooted in self-respect. You don't need to be cruel to be powerful. You don't need to be loud to be heard. But you do need to be real. Real even when it makes others uncomfortable. Real even when it costs you applause. Real even when niceness would be easier, because real is where your soul lives, and you've spent long enough outside of it. You don't have to earn love by being pleasant. You don't have to prove your worth by being useful. You don't have to apologize for being inconvenient, emotional, opinionated, or alive. You just have to stop betraying yourself. Every act of false niceness is a quiet betrayal. A betrayal of your gut, a betrayal of your limits, a betrayal of your truth. And the more you betray yourself, the lonelier you become. Even when you're surrounded by people who like you because they don't like you. They like the edited version, the filtered, fragile mask you wear for their comfort. And masks can be admired, but only souls can be loved. So, the final question becomes, would you rather be admired for who you're not, or loved for who you are? That is the core wound, and the core choice. Niceness seeks admiration. Truth seeks love. Niceness plays a role. Truth plays no games. Niceness bends, truth stands, and what you stand on becomes what you stand for. So choose something solid. Choose you, not the ideal version, not the socially acceptable version, not the never upsets anyone version, but the flawed, human, wild, honest you, the you who sometimes says no, the you who disappoints people, the you who walks away from manipulation, even if it's polite, the you who sets boundaries and keeps them, the you who no longer ties your morality to your misery. Because here's what no one told you. People may leave when you stop being nice, but the right ones arrive when you start being real. They don't need you to be agreeable. They need you to be whole. And wholeness is magnetic, not because it's sweet, but because it's sacred. In the end, the hidden cost of being nice all the time is you, your joy, your freedom, your authenticity, your life. But now you've seen it. You've counted the cost, and you no longer wish to pay it. So, take a breath, stand up taller, say what you mean, feel what you feel, choose what you need, not out of rebellion, but out of reverence, because the most radical thing you can do, in a world obsessed with niceness, is to love yourself enough to stop pretending, and from that place, you don't just reclaim your truth, you become it, and that is freedom.